All right, so we've been tasked with scaling out our social media content. A couple of ways that we could do this. One in particular is we could automate some of our social media content by looking at what competitors have been doing and figuring out, is this a personal story or is it not a personal story? And if it isn't a personal story, then we could potentially rewrite that LinkedIn post or that Twitter post. So we've written a script to do this for you. But what I'd like to do is run through it with you, but line by line, so hopefully it makes sense. So at the top, we have a couple of pip installs with a package we'll be using called Tweepy that allows us to interface with Twitter. We've also got OpenAI that will be used for the GPT-3, and also a datetime package and pandas. And then you'll see we've got some imports as well as some bits that you'll need to fill in. So the OpenAI .api key you'll find in your OpenAI account, and these keys here, all the way from consumer key down to access token secret, those you'll be able to get through setting up a Twitter app at the Twitter development, and you'll need to get these keys here, these API key and secret, and the bearer token and the access token and secret, and just click regenerate and get those. And once you've got all of those, what you can then do is have a look at this code. So we're authenticating with Twitter. We're also waiting on rate limits, which means that if you do run into weight limits, then the API is going to go to sleep for a couple of minutes, and then you'll be able to then re-query inside the same function, which means you won't get errors if you do a large amount of querying. Let's have a look at what it looks like if we're just querying for Python and getting a maximum count of 500 and the length of that. And then you can see here, we're able to essentially get a range of different tweets out, from the Python community. So this is kind of like one thing that you could do. But what's quite interesting from our point of view is we've written some automatic Python functions to help you automate this. So this one here, scrape tweets, takes in a couple of different parameters. So like it takes in the Tweepy object, takes in a keyword, which is a string, and also it takes in the number of days, which is an integer, and also the number of pages, which is a integer. And then what we're doing here is basically just finding how many number of days do you want to look back and how many pages do you want to see. And notice here there's a count, so we're cursoring through 100 tweets at a time with a 1 second sleep, and then we can go through any number of those pages and any number of those days. And then if we hit a time where we have gone back to the previous time, then we break out of the for loop and then return the list. So at some point we will break out of this loop if we go far back enough. And then the other thing that we've got is the ability to scrape user tweets. So if we know a user's timeline, then we can essentially go and get a bunch of their tweets based on chunks of 100 and the number of pages that we want, and however many pages you want going backwards in time. Cool. The other functions that I've written for us, at the moment you can see we've got this generate related keywords, and we do a bit of text string manipulation to kind of clean up the data and return a Python list. And so the prompt there is kind of like creating an order list of around up to 50 similar keywords for SEO, given a primary keyword. And then basically what this does is it allows us to generate more keywords so that we could gather more different types of tweets to find more users, which we could then feed into this. So the aim is we're kind of expanding out with a keyword research. So maybe start with 1 or 2 keywords, and then you get a load of related keywords, and then you could then start branching out and finding all of the tweets and all of the users in a kind of semantically like relevant way. This other prompt for GPT-3 is it a personal story? So act as a social media strategist responsible for reviewing competitor tweets with the sole aim to determine whether the competitor tweet includes a personal story. And then we do some simple classification and look inside that to see whether or not it is or not. And we've also got a separate prompt for rewriting the social media text. So the first thing we're going to do is we've had a look at like getting some tweets using just the native API with just Python. So let's generate some recommended keywords first. So I'm gonna comment out this code, and we can just have a look at what this returns when when the function gets back from GPT-3. Let's have a look at that. and you'll see that we've got a range of different types of words similar to Python. So like Python Web Framework, Python Data Science. So all of those could act as keywords that we may or may want to use. And then I'm not going to run this piece of code because it can take about a certain number of time, depending upon the number of days and the number of pages parameters that you decide to choose. But essentially what you're looking to get back is a bunch of tweets, and that should be a bunch of tweets for all of the different types of keywords that you've got in your recommendations. At this time, I've only limited to 5, just for the sake of the tutorial. And then what we can then do is create a data frame based off that, and then we've got a data frame of users and tweets, and you've got like the follower count, friend count, listed count, etc. And then what we want to do is we want to drop duplicates by the screen name, and then maybe, I don't know, maybe we want to look at the ones who are actually quite popular, and then maybe look at the top 10 of those. And now we've got a data frame of the top 10 of those with their screen names based on like their, you know, their follower count, and so there we are. So cool. And then what we're going to also do is then for all of these users, we're going to scrape their tweets, and I just want to get 10 pages, up to 10 pages of 100 tweets for each user. And then what you'll end up with is we take that and save it into the users tweet list, and then we get all of those metrics out there, and then you'll see we get something called a users tweets data frame, and then inside of that we've then got a bunch of tweets against user IDs, against text, and we've also got how popular it was in terms of, was it retweeted, what's the favorite count, and what's the retweet count as well, and which is quite useful. So now we're going to sort by the favorite count, and you'll see if I now look at that data frame again, it completely changes, and we start to see maybe some stuff with emojis, maybe some stuff that's a bit more interesting, and so this is sorted by favorite count. And then what we can then do is, I've just limited it to the top 10 rows, but you could obviously do this for your entire data frame, is we then basically set a column called is personal stories equal to false. And what we're doing here is we're looping over every row in the data frame, and we're then just updating that row ID with the GPT function to see whether it is a personal story or not. And so if you have a look here, you'll see, and I'll just show you this, that you can see that all of mine users tweets DF. So let's actually go and run this quickly, because I actually just overwrote my data frame, so we actually do need to run this now. So now it's going through and checking whether or not these are personal stories. And so if we now look at that, you'll see it doesn't believe that any of these tweets are personal stories, which means we could potentially rewrite all of these tweets. And they probably still require some visual inspection from a human, but the idea being is that we're just trying to, you know, throw out the ones that are like, you know, I went for a coffee last week with my friend and it was great kind of tweets. But obviously you probably still have to look at them after they've been made. And then what we're doing is filtering out any of the ones that are a personal story. So we want to say if the personal story is equal to false, then keep those ones. And if there aren't any of those, then we need to just bail on this point because we don't have any non-personal stories. And then what we then do is we create a new column called rewritten tweet, and then essentially we go through that data frame over again and essentially just write the text. And so this one in action is then going through and rewriting each of these tweets to be unique and you know, completely unique. And so this is something you could potentially do where you know a load of keywords or you know a load of competitors, and what you want to do is just put in, you know, a load of their tweets and go, okay, are these personal stories? Are these personal stories? Are these personal stories? And then the ones that aren't personal stories, we're then basically you know, creating new tweets from that. And then after that, you could give that to a low-skilled worker, potentially or maybe like a mid-level worker who could then review those tweets and really clean out the junk, and maybe even edit some of the tweets to make them viable. And so this is something you would do as well. So I think the process doesn't stop here. We still need to check the validity of these tweets, but this definitely does give us the ability to scale and get to the point where we've got a lot more of the tweets coming through. So hopefully this was useful. And if you need any help or anything, just let us know.